Alright guys, a lot of big things happened in the previous video, and gotta say, the death of George Anaki's parents, Ava and Hideyoshi, didn't come as a surprise to me. I pretty much called it when with the way it was being played out, it seemed like that was the path it was taking. And when it did happen, I'm left thinking to myself, the possibilities in my head so far are it was Beatrice, because for obvious reasons she's a supernatural being, and that's, for all we know, was able to get through the room and do what she needed to do. Most importantly of all, leaving the sigils on the door as well. The other possibility, which is unlikely even though it's still there, is the fact that if no one else could have gotten to the room, then they had to have killed each other. Hideyoshi and Ava had to have done it, in some way like that. Or it could still be Beatrice controlling them, to kill each other. Like, those are like the mini theory, not the mini theory, but one of the few theories that was going in my head, and that's why I'm curious to know how everything continues on from here. So if anything else, guys, thank you all for watching, thank you all for the love and support as usual, and with that said, let's keep continuing on. Alright everyone, and we are back. This room was a perfect locked room, sealed by a door chain that denied access equally to everyone.
なら、犯人は室内に入らずに犯行に及んだ。部屋の外から何らかの方法で。
確かに。チェーンである以上、人が通れるほどは開けなくても、多少の隙間を開けることができる。ノックして、顔を覗かせたところを襲うとか。いや、甘いか。
甘いよな。エヴァおばさんの遺体が扉のすぐそばだったなら、それも考えたぜ。だが、エヴァおばさんは部屋の奥のベッドの上。しかも、秀吉おじさんはバスルームだった。チェーンの隙間からでは、姿を見ることもできねえし、手を伸ばすこともできねえ。ちくしょう。全然ダメだぜ。さっぱりだ。
Something was tugging softly at my sleeve. It was Maria.
おお、
満足って。
バトラは親族の誰かを疑うのが嫌だから、犯人はベアトリーチェであってほしいと願ったよ。だからベアトリーチェは叶えた。バトラが言った通り、絶対に人間には無理なことをして、バトラに魔女の存在を信じさせてくれた。なのにわがまま。
There you go. I was hoping he would do that. Someone needed to shut her up. I tapped Maria, who was laughing unpleasantly on the head with my fist.
ああ、叶えてくれてありがとうよ。今のはその礼と、不謹慎な時に笑ったことへの教育的指導だ。それより教えやがれ。エヴァおばさんたちの部屋の扉にも、また怪しげな落書きがされていた。あれもまた魔法陣なのか。
あれは特に覚えやすい特徴的な形なんだから、あのくらい知っててほしいね。あ、痛い！
知らねえから花を持たせてやってんだ。ごちゃごちゃ言わねえで解説しろい。
バトラは暴力的だね。あんまり意地悪すると教えないよ。あ、痛い！言うよ、このげんこつ男。あれは、月の一の魔法陣だよ。
何の意味がある？その魔法陣のご利益は？書かれてるヘブライ語の意味は？
記されているのは、旧約聖書、詩編第107編の16節。主は聖堂の扉を破り、鉄の栓抜きを打ち破ってくださいました。魔法陣の効用は2つ。一つは、いかなる方法によって閉ざされた扉でも開くことができる。
そりゃ便利な魔法だぜ。つまり、 魔法の力に頼らなきゃ開けぬ密室の扉っていう、魔女様のアピールってわけか。もう一つの効用は、
開かぬ扉を八方塞がりの事態に見立て、扉を開く。難解な事態の時に用いることで、それまで思いつきもしなかった解決策を与えてくれるんだよ。平たく言うと、観察力や洞察力、ひらめきや直感を授けてくれるんだね。ベアトリーチェは、バトラごとき人間風情に、この扉の開き方がわかるものかって挑発してるんだよ。
Oh, now she got smacked.
よーし、もう黙れご苦労。上等だぜ。その魔女の挑戦、受け。
マリアちゃん。この世に魔女も悪魔も存在しない。父さんと母さんは、誰かが殺した。それが僕のよく知る人間なのか、知らない人間なのかはわからない。でも、そのどちらであっても、必ず人間なんだ。
しかし、どうやって、せいぜい10センチ程度しか開かない扉の隙間から、どうやったら室内の2人を。
それにしても耐え難い匂いです。一体何事なのですか
Kanon and Kumasawa, who had gone ahead, realized before they even reached the kitchen that the smell wasn't coming from there. That was because on their way to the kitchen they noticed that an even thicker wave of stench was rising up from the stairs leading to the basement.
ボイラー室。また、ボイラーの調子が悪いんでしょうか。
Those stairs led to the underground boiler room. The mansion's boiler was old and had been playing up recently. Both of them had witnessed problems with the boiler on several occasions, but they had never smelled it belching out a stench like this before. Guess we're about to find out.
今の音は
The sound that they had heard from the basement had definitely been the sound of a door closing. Although she did phrase it as a question, Kumasawa too had realized that the sound couldn't have been anything else. Kumasawa was so surprised at the sound that her knees gave way yet again and she cowered. Because at that very moment, no one could have been in the boiler room. Just a few seconds ago, everyone had been crowded together in Eva and Hideyoshi's room. So who caused the sound of a door closing just now? Well, it could be Kinzo.
カノンさん
Instantly gathering the situation, Kanon ran down towards the basement. Since they had heard the sound of a door closing just now, and there was no trace of someone climbing the stairs, it meant that the person who had closed the door was now inside the boiler room. If the boiler room had been a dead end, Kanon wouldn't have rushed in so hastily. But Kanon was a servant, so he knew. There were two entrances, one that opened to the mansion and one that opened to the courtyard. If he didn't chase them now, they might slip away. Kumasawa reached the same conclusion long after Kanon did. But she couldn't let him go alone. If the thing in the boiler room was the killer, an opponent who had easily killed 6 adults in the first murder, then Kanon would be no match if he simply confronted them alone. Of course, by this argument, Kumasawa joining him alone wouldn't mean anything but. At any rate, after a delay, Kumasawa decided that she mustn't let Kanon go alone and she dashed down the stairs. Why doesn't Battler and the others just go with them too? Or was it just Kanon and Kumasawa at the time? Like, did the perspectives change? I think that's what happened. At that time, Kanon was already in the boiler room. The boiler room's characteristic damp heat tormented him. It had always been an unpleasantly smelly and hot place. And on top of that, the room was full of that horrible stench which made Kanon feel like he was going to be sick. There was no doubt that this room was the origin. In that case, Kanon should have been searching for where the smell was coming from. However, Kanon kept gazing straight forward as he grabbed a hatchet from a tool shelf just off to the side of the door. He hadn't stretched out his hand because he wanted a hatchet. He had wanted to grab a weapon. Any weapon. Why? Kanon gazed into the darkness where the naked light bulb couldn't pierce. Then, he answered.
ルーレットは数字と赤黒にかけて配当を競い合う。だが赤か黒かのようなリスクの低い賭けはその程度の配当しか与えられない。
The words coming from Kanon's mouth were swallowed up by the darkness. That darkness suddenly started to swirl, glittering. Uh-oh. It was a very fantastical scene. Golden sparkling butterflies that hid in the shadows all over the boiler room flapped their wings, twinkling beautifully, and disappeared into the darkness, gathering together. Kanon continued speaking, directing his word to the darkness as it swallowed the butterflies up. But as the butterflies gathered in the darkness, they, perhaps, probably, no, they must have laughed. But Kanon continued to speak without faltering the slightest.
逆に、より的中率の低いかけ方をすれば、そのリスクに比例した配当が与えられる。親方様は、天文学的なリスクを的中できることを奇跡と呼び、その結果得られる天文学的な配当を魔法と呼んでいた。親方様とお前がどんな魔法を求めてルーレットに挑んでいるのか、そんなことには興味ない。しかし、お前は忘れている。ルーレットには赤でも黒でもない目が出うることを忘れている。
Roulette has a special pocket called Zero, which means that the house takes everything in a certain variant of the game, meaning that all of the coins bet on the table will be swept up just as though everyone has forfeit.
僕は一つだけ心に決めていた。もしシャノンが殺されて僕が生き残るようなことがあったなら、この身を投げ出してお前のルーレットをすべて台無しにしてやろうと。これは親方様が決めたルールでも、ましてやお前が決めたルールでもない。
It goes to show that Kanon is a very brave soul too. He really cared about Shannon, and because of her death, he's willing to risk it all now.
このルールは僕が作った。僕はもう家具じゃない。お前のルーレットのゼロなんだ。
Kanon's face twisted with humiliation. It was clear that he had been dealt ridicule in response to his self-denial. Kanon's brow creased even further, and a furious expression that he had never shown anyone appeared on his face. The hand grasping the hatchet was shaking. His sweat became drops which slid down. It was clear that the emotion causing Kanon's hand to shake was not anger alone. However, Kanon suppressed that emotion.
僕はもうお前の言葉に惑わされたりはしない。悪魔のルーレットはこれでおしまいだ。地獄にてさらに1000年。次の召喚者を待つがいい。ベアトリーチェ!
When Kanon swung the hatchet upwards and tried to dive into the darkness indefinitely sneered. It sneered at that courage as vulgar, lazy, futile, and meaningless. That was an odd variety of sound effects, including that laughter. Kanon, his hatchet still held on aloft. Couldn't take another step after that. With a clang, the hatchet that Kanon had been grasping fell and rolled on the floor. And following that, with a pair of thuds, Kanon's knees hit left, then right. That hand, which looked like it was trying to catch the sky now that the hatchet had been dropped, gradually lowered, and rested on his chest. Then, the other hand did the same. Right there was a handle with a demon-shaped design engraved upon it. The same type of weapon that had been stabbed into Eva and Hideyoshi's foreheads was in Kanon's chest. Alright, so it's safe to assume it is Beatrice. Well, hey, we all saw it coming too, but we had our theories, and We still wanted to believe otherwise just because there could have been more to it. In fact, it may not even have been Beatrice. It could have been her lackeys. Because, you know, again, she's an unknown being, a supernatural, you know, she's a supernatural entity that could... Isn't she like a sorceress? So, never know. But instead it was her. That really sucks, because Kanon was pretty cool. Fresh blood dribbled from the corner of Kanon's mouth as he twisted in anguish. It was makeup too powerful for Kanon's white skin. Around this scene, the glittering gold butterflies danced mesmerizingly. Wow, I cannot read today. Mesmerizingly through the darkness. It was a beautiful, beautiful dance, a funeral march of tribute, ridicule, and contempt for a single boy's self-sacrifice. Kanon had already been prepared for his own death, but he attempted one last measure of resistance, to reject death in at least the form it had been delivered to him. With both hands, he grasped the handle of the weapon sticking to his chest, and gritting his teeth at the acute unearthly pain, he pulled it out. For only a moment, a bright red spray gushed out. It made an unpleasant bloop sound. It probably resembled the sound of Kanon's soul as it was sucked into the swamp of the dead.
Kanon-san?
The others should have came and saw this so that they can finally believe that Beatrice exists, finally, because that would have been an incredible scene to witness, at least in the sense that at least now they know there is a 19th person. Kumasawa screamed at the incomprehensible sight in front of her. Kanon was lying in a pool of blood. Kumasawa's heart was a complete mess. Ah, what a terrible fate. He wouldn't have been killed if I had been with him. Ah, what incredible fortune. If I had been with him, I might have been killed too. As she screamed, her expression was filled with complete confusion and all of the muscles of her face were pulled up almost as though she was smiling while crying. No one could have made fun of an expression such as this.
何事ですか熊沢返事をしなさい熊沢
The first one to dash in was Natsuhi with rifle at the ready. Battler and Genji dashed in after her. Normally, they probably would have started discussing the origin of that violent stench filling the boiler room. But after they saw Kanon, who was lying on the ground as if he were drowning in an ocean of his own blood, the stench wasn't important anymore.
返事をしなさい
That's a stupid thing. He's dead.
源氏南條先生をここに
Oh no, he dead. Natsuhi realized that even though Kanon was on the verge of death, he was still conscious. So she sent Genji to get the doctor. Oh, I thought he was dead. Like, he had a hatchet to his chest, and then he pulled it out with all the blood gushing out, right? He should be dead. Or, if anything, he's dead anyway, because no one can help him after this. Natsuhi, holding the rifle aloft, faced the darkness in the center of the boiler room and shouted.
そこに隠れているものは何者ですおとなしく出てきなさいそちらから出てこないなら容赦なく撃ちます
ライトだおばさん照らすぜ
Battler, thinking quickly, took a large flashlight from the tool shelf alongside the door and used its light to cut through the darkness Natsuhi was glaring into. But the light only shone on mechanical-looking piping in the door. The door had been left open in a small crack, and it was obvious that someone had left through there in a hurry. Oh, so this whole time, she came in through the crack door as a butterfly. Wow. Here I thought she was, like, it's technically magic. I just thought she, like, teleported or something. It never occurred to me that those little butterflies would actually be the ones that would, you know, break in, so to speak, because it wasn't much of a break-in, if anything.
夏日おばさんあの扉はどこへ
源氏あの扉はどこに通じているのですか
中庭です逃がすかよくそこの野郎
Looks like it's Battler's time to die. Let's see how he handles this one. Battler let out a war cry as he slammed into the door. Cool air from outside suddenly rushed in. There were some thin, rough stairs leading up. Battler ran up them,
待ちな
shouting.
さい、バトラ君。一人では危険です。
Natsuki also rushed up the stairs, chasing after Battler. At the top was the courtyard. The courtyard of the mansion had been built strictly for lighting purposes. Sorry, not lightning. Lighting purposes, so it wasn't a very elegant place. Because it was surrounded on all sides, the air was calm and completely undisturbed, even though they could hear the sound of strong winds. There was only the gentle, sorrowful rain. Through the cold-scattered raindrops, Battler dashed up the stairs and into the courtyard, where he looked in every direction. Of course, the odds of him finding a suspicious silhouette just standing around nonchalantly were pretty much zero. Battler turned around, looking in all directions. He turned again and again. He kept spinning until he almost lost his sense of direction. He prayed that he would see the culprit somewhere in this scenery. But there was no chance. All he saw as he spun was more and more of the mansion's heartless walls and windows. Furthermore, there were two entrances into the mansion from the courtyard, and neither of them were locked. Because the courtyard couldn't be entered from outside the mansion, the doors had been built without locks. He couldn't tell which one they had left through. He had to give up. Battler pounded the wall with his fist, swearing.
バトラ君、一人で先走ってはダメです。バトラ君。
Battler put his head against the wall and scratched at it with his fingernails as he cried.
畜生畜生畜生エヴァおばさんに秀吉おじさん、さらにカノン君かよ。6人も殺しやがった。飽き足らずさらに3人も殺しやがった。ふざけるなふざけるな。エヴァおばさんも秀吉おじさんも昔からいつも優しくしてくれる愉快なおばさんたちだったじゃねえかよ。カノン君とは昨日会ったばかりだが、きっとこれから仲良くなれたと思うぜ。なんで殺したんだ。どうしてどうして。
Keep in mind, guys, this is still just chapter 1. Gosh, what's gonna happen when we finally meet Beatrice?
人ってのはな、殺しちまったらな、二度と生き返らねえんだぞ。
That's almost similar to the ever popular quote of people die when they are dead.
タケノコみてえにひょいひょい生えてきちゃこねえんだぞ。
Or, well, I'm sorry, no, no, the actual quote is people die when they are killed. There you go. Fate stay night, baby. Yeah, I love it.
どうして殺すんだよ。どうしてどうして。
I'm sure Battler will be able to see her soon enough. She'll make her presence known, because we saw in the the intro, that they do meet. Battler was a boy who could understand the feelings of pain and regret in a person's heart. So he cried, with all his strength. Natsuki, who had always thought of Battler as a strong person, was a little surprised to find that he had this delicate side. And at the same time understood how easily hurt the heart of a young person could be, so she held him.
大丈夫です。あなたも、ジョージ君も、マリアちゃんも、ジェシカも、私が絶対に守ります。
Oh no, don't say that. You're gonna raise your own death flag.
母として、そして、後宮家の代表として。
Battler, after sobbing into Natsuki's chest for a while, wiped his tears with a bitter smile and tried to convey that he had cried more than enough already, just as he had done them times before.
とにかく、一度下に戻りましょう。犯人を探すより、自分たちの身を守る方が最優先です。
I mean, what can you do? She already killed like... she killed 9 people now, right?
明日になれば船が来る。
Oh, we're not gonna make that.
そうすれば警察がやってきて、すべてを白日のもとにさらし出してくれるでしょう。犯人がどうあがこうとも、この島から逃げられるものですか。
そうっすね。警察さえ来れば。
When the seagulls cry, the crime will be solved. But for some reason, Battler felt a slight sense of uneasiness, as if the seagulls would never cry again. That couldn't be true. When the typhoon passes, the lively seagulls should return to the harbor again. I returned to the boiler room along with Aunt Natsuhi and told the room weekly that we hadn't found anything. They told me that Dr. Nanjo and George Aniki had carried Kanon to the servant room. The servant room had a first aid kit and a sink and could apparently function as a nurse's office. Kumasawa-san and Jessica had accompanied them. Stains from Kanon-kun's blood remained on the floor. Judging by the large amount of blood loss and the ruthless shape of the weapon that had fallen unceremoniously to the ground, I figured that Dr. Nanjo's treatment would probably end in vain. That weapon was doubtlessly the same type that had been stuck in Auntie Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi's foreheads. But wait, isn't that the demonic design on the handle a little different? There seems to be some small differences in that part. Still, as far as their overall shape was concerned, the weapons were all of the same type. Though it had been brutal, we'd left the weapon stuck into Auntie Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi to preserve the crime scene. So this was the first time I was able to have a perfect view of the entire weapon. Indeed, the weapon was not bladed like a knife, but shaped like an ice pick. Or a rather thin stake. And also, it had a spiral-shaped design, sort of like a drill. To use a disturbing analogy, it looked like something that might be driven into the hearts of human sacrifices in some demonic ritual. Including the handle. It was about 25 centimeters long. Half of that was the stake-shaped part, which was stained with deep red blood. The length of the blood-stained part made it clear just how deeply it must have penetrated into Kanon-kun's chest. But Aunt Natsuhi and the rest were not even looking at the weapon, instead standing in front of the incinerator where the horrible stench was emanating from. They had probably pulled that out of the furnace where it must have been burning. It was still smoldering and kept sending out dense waves of that awfully unpleasant smell. Genji-san and Maria were staring down at it. Aunt Natsuhi probably couldn't stand to look directly at it. She kept shaking her head, her back to it. I thought that after everything that's happened, nothing could surprise me anymore. But this was... I stood there for a while, moaning with a rising urge to vomit. The true nature of that unearthly stench was the charred smell from within the incinerator of a burning corpse. The clothes, the surface of the body, and the hair were all hideously burned. That grotesque corpse was in a state where not the face, nor the age, nor even the gender could be guessed. But when I thought about it calmly, I realized that a corpse appearing at this time could only be one person. Grandfather, who had disappeared that morning and whose whereabouts had been unknown.
おそらく親方様だと思います。
私も同感です。このようなお姿でお亡くなりになるとは。おいたわしや。
でも、この死体、本当にじい様だって保証はあるんすか？こうも黒焦げじゃ、性別さえも想像つかないってのに。
バトラ君、足をご覧なさい。
Aunt Natsuhi, with her handkerchief over her mouth and her eyes averted, pointed and told me to look at the burnt corpse's feet.
両足の指です。よくご覧になってください。
Just as Genji-san had said, there were 6 toes on each foot. Each of those toes had been arranged so normally that I hadn't noticed.
親方様はお生まれの時から両足の指に特徴がございました。
He had extra pair of toes?
そして故に親方様は後宮家の再興を託されたのです。
後宮家には昔から生まれつき多子症の方が多かったそうです。多分遺伝的なものでしょう。
Polydactyly literally means many fingers. Because of a little mistake by God, when the person is born, one of their toes or fingers splits into 2, and the total number increases. But a big deal isn't usually made of polydactyly in the world at large. That's funny because when I used to live in the Philippines, there was a classmate of mine that had that, 2 thumbs. I remember that. So it's called polydactyly. That's because it isn't a disease, but something people are born with. So the hospital is already aware of it when they are still babies, and at about the time they turn 1 year old, they are given surgery to make them normal. So even if a child has polydactyly, it is treated before they become self-aware, so they might not even remember it themselves. Incidentally, it seems that it can occur with a probability of about 1 in every 2,000 babies. So even though it's not usually seen, it isn't that rare at all. Speaking of which, I think Uncle Hideyoshi mentioned something to me long ago. Something about how even Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the man who unified Japan at the end of the Sengoku period, possessed 6 fingers on one hand. According to Aunt Natsu, among the many Ushiromiya family heads, the ones praised most for their wisdom had all possessed polydactyly. Because of that, when grandfather was born, his relatives were all excited at the thought that he might become another wise leader. And when the leading relatives all died in the Great Kanto earthquake, it was apparently argued that if anyone could restore the family from that, it would be grandfather because of the auspicious sign of his birth. If grandfather thought being the head was not a bad gig, this 6th toe might have been pretty lucky for him. Come to think of it, I think that I've heard about some country where it's believed that people with polydactyly should be treated as gods and revered. This is beside the point, but it's fairly common in mystery novels for a corpse to be burned to hide whose body it is. But it looks like in grandfather's case, just being toasted wasn't enough to hide the proof of his identity. Okay, wow. Alright guys, so if anything, I'm gonna have to end the video here for today. Thank you all for watching. We finally got a glimpse as to how all of these murders have been occurring through Kanonkun's bravery, I guess. And although we are unsure if he'll make it, it still seems like he's in the red right now, but he's not dead yet. So if anything, we'll find out what happens in the next one. So thank you all for watching.